Residents use the side gate. The voice cuts clean through the morning as Victoria Ellis slows from her run, heat fading off her skin in thin breath. She stops at the yellow line. A white blazer, a clipped radio, and a stare wait for her at the pedestal. Tessa Hart doesn't blink, heel poised, hand resting on the console like it's proof. Victoria Ellis says nothing yet. The street is quiet enough to hear sprinklers tapping somewhere beyond the hedges. Sweat dries on her collarbone. She looks at the metal ribs of the gate, then back at Tessa. No badge on her neck, no key fob in her hand. Just running shoes and the steadiness that comes when you know where you live. Delivery access is closed, Clara Jennings adds, chin lifting a fraction. Visitors use the lane down the hill. Victoria Ellis steps 1/2 pace forward. The sensor wakes with a small buzz. A red blink answers. Access denied. Clara Jennings' mouth sets at the corners like a decision she's already made. You're not cleared to trigger that sensor. Step back. I live here, Naomi says, voice low, even final. A beat. Clara Jennings surveys Nike fabric, bare wrists, the absence of symbols she recognizes, then reaches for the radio. The movement is tiny, practiced, meant to remind Victoria Ellis who stands on which side of the console. Unit 3, Clara Jennings says into the mic, eyes never leaving Victoria Ellis. Female at gate 6 attempting to force sensor activation. No visible ID, non-compliant tone. The words hang like tape across a doorway. Victoria Ellis doesn't touch them. Her gaze shifts briefly to the crest carved into the marble plaque, half hidden under bougainvillea. She knows every bolt behind this panel, every code, every hinge. She doesn't explain that. She doesn't move. I said, Clara Jennings repeats, colder now, step back. Victoria Ellis breathes once, slow. No, she says. You will. Clara Jennings' lips pressed into a thin line as she adjusted her sunglasses, her voice slicing through the cool morning air with impatience. Ma'am, delivery access is closed. You'll need to use the visitor lane down the hill. Victoria Ellis remained still, one hand on her hip, breath even from the run. She wasn't rattled. She wasn't even sweating anymore. She was composed, grounded, her presence heavier than her appearance suggested. She tilted her head slightly, studying Clara the way one might study a stubborn child. I live here, she repeated, her tone level and calm, like a fact written in stone. Clara scoffed, feigning disbelief. Really? Because residents don't arrive in running shoes and sweatpants. Her gaze drifted deliberately over Victoria's outfit, searching for some flaw to justify the dismissal. And you don't look like anyone I've ever seen coming through this gate. Victoria said nothing, but her silence had a weight that pressed against the space between them. The gate's sensor buzzed red again. Access denied. Clara seized on the moment. She lifted her radio and spoke crisply into it, her words designed to sting. Unit 3, I've got a female attempting to force sensor activation at gate 6. No visible ID, non-compliant tone, possible trespasser situation. The word trespasser lingered like smoke, thick and heavy. Behind Victoria, the hum of a pastel delivery van approached. Luis Ramirez, a courier, slowed at the sight of the standoff. His hand instinctively went to his phone, camera raised. In a world where everything could be broadcast, this was too sharp a moment to ignore. Victoria's eyes locked on Clara's, and though she hadn't moved, something in the balance shifted. The confrontation was no longer just about a gate. It was about perception, about who belonged, and who was allowed to say so. Luis Ramirez adjusted his phone, angling it so his viewers could see both women clearly. The runner in sweat-soaked Nike gear, and the crisp, immovable security manager in white. The live stream counter jumped almost instantly. Hundreds, then thousands. Comments began flooding the feed. She looks like she belongs there. Why's security acting like this? This is about race, isn't it? Clara Jennings, still unaware that her every word was being broadcast, squared her shoulders like a performer on stage. This is private property, she said, her voice deliberately loud, projecting authority. And you, she gestured at Victoria, do not belong here. Victoria didn't flinch. She didn't meet the camera or appeal to the crowd. Her eyes stayed on Clara, steady and unblinking. Silence became her weapon. The guardhouse door swung open with a metallic groan, and 2 additional security officers emerged. One zipped his vest halfway, professional but clearly curious. The other clutched a steaming stainless mug. sipping lazily until he noticed the tension in Clara's jaw. They slowed, eyes narrowing as they assessed the situation. "Who's this?" the officer in the vest asked, tone neutral. Clara didn't even look at him. "Someone who thinks she owns the place," she replied curtly, her gaze locked on Victoria as though daring her to break. The younger officer frowned. "Why don't we just ask her name?" Clara's head snapped toward him, glare sharp as a blade. "We're verifying," she hissed, ending the discussion. Victoria drew in a deep breath and let it out slowly, measured, her voice calm but cutting. "I don't need to prove myself to someone who hasn't earned the right to question me." Luis's camera caught it perfectly. His comments section erupted. "She's powerful." Clara just embarrassed herself. History in the making. And though the sun was still climbing, the heat of the moment had already begun to burn. Clara Jennings took a step closer, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement, each sound like a punctuation mark to her arrogance. She lowered her voice, letting it drip with sarcasm, as though the intimacy of tone could wound deeper than volume. "Listen, lady," Clara said, her smile thin and cruel. "I don't know what stunt you're trying to pull, but this isn't one of those gotcha TikToks. You're not going to go viral off me." A ripple of laughter broke out from one of the junior guards, but it died quickly under Victoria's steady gaze. She didn't smirk. She didn't break posture. Instead, she allowed a small, deliberate smile to form, the kind that carried history, not amusement. "This isn't for TikTok," Victoria replied, her voice measured, almost too soft for the morning air. Then, like the strike of a bell, "This is for legacy." The words fell heavy, reverberating into the silence. For the first time, Clara faltered. Her lips twitched, betraying a flash of unease before she covered it with a brittle chuckle. From the sidewalk, Luis Ramirez spoke before he could stop himself, his voice carrying just enough to be picked up by the live stream. "Wait a minute, I've delivered to this address before. That's Miss Ellis, right? Victoria Ellis?" The name landed like a spark in dry grass. Heads turned. A man jogging with his dog slowed to a halt. Even the coffee-sipping guard blinked, recognition dawning in his eyes. Clara snapped, her voice sharp and desperate. "Step back. This doesn't concern you." But it did now, because the name had been spoken aloud, and names carried weight. Victoria Ellis, Ellis Tech Systems, Clarion Financial Board member, one of the most recognized black women in American tech, a name tied to billion-dollar acquisitions in neighborhoods rebuilt from the ground up. And there she stood, in running shoes, denied entry to her own home. Clara Jennings let out a sharp laugh, brittle and dismissive, like glass cracking under pressure. "A phone call? That's your power move?" she sneered. "Anyone can hire someone to play along." She turned back toward the console with exaggerated confidence, her manicured fingers hovering over the keys as if she could overwrite reality itself. Victoria Ellis stood perfectly still. Her chest rose and fell with steady breaths, her face unreadable. On the other end of her call, Maya Chen's voice came through crisp and calm. "Confirmed, Miss Ellis. Executing Protocol 7 now." For a second, silence hung like a held breath. Then, click. The heavy gate shuddered. A soft mechanical chime echoed across the courtyard. The console screen blinked, switching from red to green, and above them the automated voice rang out with finality. "Override successful. Primary resident, Victoria Ellis, verified by Ellis Tech OS." The words cut through the morning like a church bell. Both junior guards froze mid-step. The one with the mug lowered it without realizing. The other stared at Clara, his brows tightening in quiet conflict. Luis Ramirez swung his phone to capture the panel. His live stream comments exploded. "Yo, she's the owner." The gate literally said her name. This security lady is done for. Clara's lips parted, but no rebuttal came. She looked like someone trying to command a storm with a whisper. Victoria stepped forward, unhurried. Each stride was measured, steady, carrying the weight of decades of dismissal, endured and overcome. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't explain. She didn't need to. The system had already testified for her, and the world watching live was taking notes. The green light glowed steady on the gate's panel, pulsing like truth made visible. But Clara Jennings refused to see it. She straightened her blazer with a snap of her wrist, her sunglasses flashing as she pivoted back toward Victoria Ellis. "Override or not," Clara declared, her voice pitched high and sharp, You're not walking through until I authorize it. For all I know, the system's been compromised. The younger officer in the vest shifted uneasily, glancing at the screen still showing Victoria's name. But ma'am, the system confirmed. Not yet, Clara cut him off, her voice rising with desperation. We need more verification. Anyone can spoof a system if they know the right code. Luis Ramirez's live stream panned over the scene. His viewers flooded the chat with disbelief. She's still blocking her? It literally said her name. This is racial bias on camera, no question. Behind Victoria, the sound of tires crunching on pavement signaled another arrival. A black Tesla rolled to a stop, its tinted window sliding halfway down. Sofia Martinez, elegant in her 40s, leaned out. What's going on here? She asked, her voice calm but edged with suspicion. Luis turned his phone to her. They're blocking the woman who owns this house. Gate verified her. Security's refusing. Sofia's gaze shifted past him, landing on Victoria. Recognition spread across her face like dawn breaking. Oh my God, she whispered. That's Victoria Ellis, from Ellis Tech. Clara's jaw tightened. Her grip on the panel stiffened as if holding it could hold her authority together. But the recognition in Sofia's voice, the crowd murmuring, the phones recording, each detail chipped away at her control. And through it all, Victoria stood silent, calm, watching. Because sometimes power didn't need to move quickly. It only needed to wait for the truth to settle. The silence after Sofia's recognition stretched like glass. Thin, brittle, ready to shatter. The junior officer in the half-zipped vest shifted from one foot to the other, his eyes darting between the glowing green panel and Clara's rigid stance. His voice broke through, uncertain but honest. Ma'am, aren't we supposed to follow system verification? Clara whipped her head toward him, her expression tight, lips drawn like a snare. You want to risk your job for her? Fine, but don't come running to me when this whole thing blows up as a system glitch. The officer hesitated, his jaw working like he was chewing on the risk. He finally muttered, It doesn't look like a glitch. The second officer, coffee mug still in hand, stepped back entirely. His eyes were on Victoria now, on her poise, her calm, the undeniable way she carried herself. Slowly, he shook his head. I'm not putting my name on this. Not today. From the sidewalk, Sofia Martinez raised her voice so every bystander could hear. You're doubling down on bias. The gate confirmed her. The system confirmed her. What else do you want? Her blood. Murmurs rippled outward. A man holding a dog leash whispered, She belongs here. A barista with a tray of iced lattes froze mid-step. His eyes locked on Victoria, like he recognized history unfolding in real time. Phones lifted higher. Live stream comments scrolled faster. This is racism, clear as day. Security's digging their own grave. Victoria Ellis, calm as steel. Victoria inhaled, her chest rising with the quiet rhythm of someone who had been through this too many times before. When she spoke, her voice was soft, but it carried like thunder through the morning air. People like me built this neighborhood. The words stopped the crowd. Gasps rose from every direction, the statement slicing through prejudice and pride alike. Even the guards looked shaken. And Clara Jennings? Her mouth parted, but no words came. Because when truth is spoken that plainly, excuses shrivel into silence. Clara Jennings's face flushed red beneath her sunglasses. The weight of murmurs from the crowd, the steady gaze of Victoria Ellis, and the green glow on the gate panel pressed down on her like an invisible hand. Pride wouldn't let her step back. Not now. Not in front of witnesses. Her hand trembled as she hovered over her radio. For a split second, it seemed she might reconsider, but then her thumb pressed down, the motion deliberate and desperate. Unit 7, she barked into the receiver, her voice loud enough for the crowd to hear. Respond. Escalation at Gate 6. Possible impersonator on site. Notify LAPD dispatch. Immediate response requested. The words sliced the air like a knife. The crowd gasped, phones lifting higher, live stream comments exploding. She called the cops? On the homeowner? This is madness. Victoria didn't move. Her arms rested loosely at her sides, shoulders squared, her body language as steady as the marble pillars framing the estate behind her. Her eyes narrowed only slightly, a glimmer of something colder surfacing beneath her calm. "You just called the police," she said, her tone not rising, not questioning, simply stating fact. Clara lifted her chin, mistaking defiance for strength. "Yes," she said, "because in this neighborhood, we don't tolerate threats." From the sidewalk, Luis Ramirez couldn't hold back. "What threat? She hasn't moved an inch." Sofia Martinez leaned out of her Tesla, her voice sharp. "She's the victim here. You're the aggressor, Clara." But Clara didn't turn, didn't acknowledge the voices gathering against her. She doubled down, eyes locked on Victoria. "You're just another trespasser with a story," she hissed. "And I don't care what some automated voice said. If you don't leave the premises now, you're going to jail." The words echoed, brittle against the steady silence Victoria carried like armor. She blinked slowly, a faint curve in her lips, and reached for her phone once more. Not in fear, not in anger, but with the calm precision of someone who knew exactly what came next. Victoria Ellis didn't flinch. She didn't even glance toward Clara's radio. Instead, she lifted her own phone, screen cracked at the corner, and pressed a single button with deliberate calm. Her voice was steady, precise, almost too soft for the drama of the moment, but everyone leaned in to hear it. "Maya," she said as if ordering breakfast, "they've escalated. Activate Phase 2, full system audit, real-time compliance log, broadcast on my open channel." The response came instantly. Maya Chen's voice, cool and professional, carried through the speaker loud enough for every witness to hear. "Understood, Miss Ellis. Phase 2 is live. All security footage streaming. Ownership records are now front-facing. Gate logs archived. Incident time-stamped under Clara Jennings." The effect was electric. Clara's name spoken aloud through Victoria's phone hit harder than any shouted argument. The guards stiffened. The younger officer muttered, "Wait, this is official? This is really happening?" Luis Ramirez angled his camera closer, narrating into his live stream. "You all heard that. They're archiving everything. This isn't just a standoff anymore. It's documentation. It's corporate oversight. She's flipping the script in real time." His viewer count spiked, comments flying. "Phase 2? This is bigger than security." She came prepared. Across the street, a young black woman jogger stepped forward, earbuds still dangling. "I live 3 blocks down," she said, voice firm. "I've seen her running here every morning for years. That's her house. Everyone knows it." Clara spun toward her, panic flashing in her voice. "This is not your concern?" But the jogger didn't budge. Her voice rose. "It's yours, and you just made it public." Around them, more phones lifted. What had started as one courier's live stream was now a sea of glowing screens. Witnesses weren't just bystanders anymore. They were recorders of truth. And Victoria? She still hadn't moved more than an inch. Calm, silent, steady, while the entire system bent toward her presence. The crowd had grown dense enough that the street seemed to pause. Dog walkers frozen mid-stride, a cyclist straddling his bike, even a delivery driver abandoning his van door half open just to watch. Every eye was fixed on the console, waiting. Then it came. The gate buzzed once, then again, the deep mechanical hum rising like a drumbeat. The red light that had mocked Victoria moments earlier flickered, shifted, and then glowed a steady green. Brighter this time, unmistakable. The sound was simple, just a chime, but in the silence of that standoff, it thundered like a verdict. The machine itself had cast judgment. Luis Ramirez swung his phone toward the panel, his voice shaking with excitement. "Yo, it's green again. You see that? It's green." His live stream exploded with comments. "She owns it. The gate chose her. This is bigger than just a door." Victoria remained where she was, calm as a stone pillar. She hadn't rushed forward to prove a point, hadn't lunged to claim the opening. She let the green glow speak louder than any words could. Her stillness was deliberate, commanding, almost ceremonial. The junior officer with the vest leaned over the console, reading what the others could not ignore. "Her name's right here," he muttered, voice low but audible. "Victoria Ellis, deed holder since 2017. Registered resident for 3 adjacent lots." Clara spun on him, venom in her tone. "That doesn't matter. Systems fail. Systems get hacked." But her words rang hollow, bouncing uselessly against the weight of truth now visible to everyone. Victoria finally shifted, her eyes lifting to Clara's. Her voice was quiet, almost kind, but cutting all the same. The only system that failed today was your judgment. Phones captured every syllable. The green glow pulsed once more, as if echoing her words, and the crowd, once hesitant, was no longer uncertain. They had seen enough to know who belonged. The hum of the green light lingered in the air like a truth no one could deny. Yet Clara Jennings clung to her stance as if sheer will could rewrite reality. Her knuckles whitened on the console, and the edges of her voice frayed when she spoke. "Don't be fooled," she snapped, eyes darting between the officers. "It's a malfunction. You think a system override proves anything? Anyone with enough money can fake credentials." But the certainty in her tone had thinned, and everyone could hear it. The junior officer in the half-zipped vest shifted his weight from one foot to the other, his jaw tightening. He glanced at the glowing panel, then back at Victoria, who stood perfectly still, radiating calm. Finally, he broke the silence. "Ma'am," he said carefully, almost apologetically, "protocol says we're supposed to follow system verification, and the system just confirmed her. Twice." Clara whipped her head toward him, fury simmering beneath her glasses. "Do you want to stake your career on this? Because when this gets exposed as a hack, it won't be me who takes the fall." The officer swallowed, but his shoulders stiffened. "I'd rather risk my career than ignore the truth," he murmured. The second guard, coffee mug dangling forgotten in his hand, shook his head. He took 2 steps back, distancing himself from Clara. "I'm not signing my name to this mess. The system's clear, and so is she." He tilted his chin toward Victoria. A ripple ran through the watching crowd. Murmurs grew louder, spreading like a tide. "Even her guards don't believe her. She's losing them. Look at the shift." Victoria's expression didn't change. She didn't gloat, didn't smirk. Her silence was heavier than Clara's shouting, her presence steadier than Clara's unraveling pride. And though the confrontation had started at a locked gate, it was no longer about the gate at all. It was about loyalty, and truth was beginning to win. The tension around the gate had thickened, every second stretching longer than it should. Dozens of phones now pointed toward the standoff, their small red lights blinking like witnesses that would never forget. Luis Ramirez's live stream counter jumped past 10,000 viewers, comments flooding the feed. "She's the homeowner. Period. This is bias caught live." Security just wrote their own resignation. Sofia Martinez leaned further out of her Tesla, her voice ringing across the pavement. "This isn't complicated. The system confirmed her. The gate confirmed her. What else do you want? DNA. A blood sample." Her words struck like a spark. From the sidewalk, a man with a dog leash raised his voice. "I've seen her here before. She jogs past us nearly every morning." The young black jogger, earbuds still dangling, stepped forward with conviction. "That's right. I live 3 blocks down. She belongs here more than anyone questioning her." The murmurs swelled into open defiance. Another woman, clutching a yoga mat, called out, "Why are you still blocking her if the system already cleared her? Admit you were wrong." Phones lifted higher. The crowd wasn't passive anymore. They were participating, feeding the live stream with their voices, their outrage, their solidarity. Clara Jennings spun toward them, her composure unraveling. "This is a restricted area," she barked. "Step back, all of you." But no one moved. The barista with his tray of iced coffees lowered it carefully to the curb, freeing both hands to hold up his phone. "We're not stepping back," he said flatly. "We're stepping up. Everyone here can see what's happening, Clara, and so can the world." Victoria Ellis hadn't spoken since the gate glowed green, but she didn't need to. Her stillness had become the anchor of the moment, and the crowd, united in their voices, were the storm around her, tearing away the last fragments of Clara's control. The chorus of voices rose like a tide, battering against Clara Jennings's brittle stance. Phones captured every second, live stream comments scrolled in real time, and the crowd's disbelief had curdled into outrage. Clara's jaw tightened, but her hands trembled as they hovered near her radio. She pressed it anyway, her voice slicing through the air, sharp and desperate. "Unit 7, respond. Escalation at Gate 6. Possible impersonator. Immediate backup needed." Static. Nothing. She pressed again, harder, as if force could summon authority back into her grasp. Unit 7, respond. Still silence. Then another voice broke through, loud enough for everyone to hear. Maya Chen, calm and clinical, through Victoria's phone speaker. Ms. Ellis, LAPD dispatch call intercepted. Legal team is monitoring this incident in real time. Compliance has reviewed Clara Jennings's file. 7 prior complaints on record. None escalated. Pattern confirmed. The words landed like thunder. Both junior officers stiffened, their eyes darting between Clara and Victoria. Luis Ramirez gasped into his live stream, whispering for his audience. Y'all heard that? 7 complaints. This isn't the first time. Clara's face drained of color. For a heartbeat, she looked less like a guard and more like a defendant caught mid-sentence. But pride surged again, brittle and frantic. You can't override my authority, she snapped, her voice cracking under its own weight. Victoria tilted her head slightly, her gaze steady and unblinking. When she spoke, her tone was calm but final, the kind of voice that didn't need volume to dominate. You never had authority, she said. Just a uniform, just a gate, neither of which you control anymore. The crowd erupted in a wave of murmurs and gasps, every phone lens locked onto Clara's unraveling. Sofia Martinez raised her camera higher, her voice sharp with satisfaction. That's the line. That's the truth. And Clara? She stood frozen, gripping a dead radio, drowning in a silence that belonged to her no more. The courtyard was silent except for the faint buzz of electronics. Dozens of phones glowed like watchful eyes, documenting every breath, every word. Then, almost on cue, the gate gave its verdict again. Buzz. The panel blinked once, red fighting to hold, then shifted into a steady green. The sound rang clear and unarguable, echoing down the marble walls of the estate like a gavel striking wood. The crowd stirred, gasps rippling through them. Luis Ramirez swung his camera toward the console, his voice breathless. It's green again. She's cleared. No excuses left. But Victoria Ellis didn't rush forward, didn't claim victory with a triumphant gesture. She stood still for a beat, letting the moment breathe. Then she moved, one deliberate step, then another. Not fast, not boastful. Slow, measured, dignified. The iron bars parted before her, as though bowing to their rightful owner. Sunlight caught the sheen of sweat on her brow, making her presence glow. The simple act of walking forward carried more power than any argument. Clara Jennings staggered backward, her composure unraveling one heel click at a time. Override or not, she sputtered, you're not walking through here. But the words landed hollow, drowned out by the crowd's shifting energy. Murmurs rose like a chorus. She belongs. It's her house. Clara's finished. Victoria passed the threshold, shoulders squared, eyes calm. She didn't need the crowd to defend her, or the system to justify her. The green light was simply a reflection of what she already knew. This was her home. And for everyone watching, on the street and on screens across the world, her slow, quiet steps through that gate became a lesson in power. Real power that could not be denied. Clara Jennings lunged toward the console as though sheer force could undo what had just happened. Her heel slipped against the slate, but she caught herself, pressing her badge hard against the panel. Beep. Red. She tried again. Beep. Red. Over and over, the system spat back the same verdict. Access denied. Her manicured fingers flew across the keypad, nails clicking like gunfire, but the screen blinked unfeelingly. Override locked. Resident verified. No, 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 Clara hissed, slamming the side of her hand against the panel. The motion was frantic, panicked, more like a gambler losing their last coin than a professional securing an estate. Victoria Ellis paused just beyond the threshold, turning slightly, her eyes calm but unyielding. She spoke softly, her voice carrying across the courtyard with surgical precision. You see, Clara, the difference between us is simple. You thought the gate gave you power, but it only revealed your fear. Irony. The younger guard exchanged a glance with his partner. Their silence said everything. One shifted uncomfortably, while the other took a deliberate step away from Clara, as though her unraveling might be contagious. Clara clutched her radio next, pressing buttons furiously. Nothing but static answered her. She shook it once, slapped it against her palm, desperate for it to spring back to life. But the line was dead, cut off like her grip on authority. The crowd murmured louder now, disbelief turning into something closer to pity. A man whispered into his phone for his live stream. She's finished. Even her tools don't listen to her anymore. And above it all, Victoria stood motionless, her silence filling the air heavier than Clara's frantic noise. She didn't need to fight. The system itself was fighting for her. The dead static of Clara's radio still hung in the air when a new voice cut through. Crisp, composed, undeniable. It came not from her device, but from Victoria Ellis's phone, broadcasting loud enough for the crowd and the live stream audience beyond to hear every word. "Ms. Ellis," said Maya Chen, calm as steel, "the override is complete. All security feeds from Gate 6 have been archived. Compliance recommends immediate suspension of Clara Jennings, pending internal investigation." The crowd gasped. One of the junior guards' eyes widened. Luis Ramirez whispered into his phone's mic, his live stream now cresting over 15,000 viewers. "You all heard that. She's suspended. On the spot." Clara froze. Her hand, still clutching the useless radio, trembled. Her sunglasses slipped slightly down her nose, revealing eyes wide with disbelief. "Suspended?" she sputtered, her voice cracking. "I've worked here for 5 years. You can't just erase me like this." Victoria turned her head toward Clara, her expression carved in calm authority. She took a step closer, her words deliberate and edged with truth. "Erase you?" she repeated softly. "No, Clara. You erased yourself the moment you saw sweatpants instead of ownership, the moment you treated presence as trespass." Her voice carried over the murmurs of the crowd, slicing through their disbelief and igniting something deeper: recognition. The two guards exchanged uneasy looks. One muttered under his breath, "She's right." The other nodded, his shoulders slumping as he quietly removed his earpiece. Clara's badge, once a symbol of her authority, blinked red at her chest like a heartbeat fading into silence. Victoria didn't gloat. She didn't need to. She simply stood in the courtyard of her own estate, her presence the only verdict that mattered. Clara Jennings stood frozen, her badge blinking red against her white blazer like a wound she couldn't cover. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, but the fight in her eyes had dimmed into panic. For years she had ruled this gate with a raised chin and sharp orders. Now her tools lay dead in her hands and her authority collapsed in front of everyone. She opened her mouth to protest, but the words tangled in her throat. I didn't mean for it to." Her voice cracked, trembling where it once commanded. Victoria Ellis didn't answer. She simply stood there, poised and still, her silence more devastating than any rebuttal. She didn't need to shout. She had already won. Then it happened. From the sidewalk, a single pair of hands clapped once. The sound echoed across the slate and marble like a spark in dry air. Heads turned. The clapping continued, slow, steady, deliberate. Another joined, then another. The applause spread, not like a cheer at a performance, but like an acknowledgement of a wrong being corrected. The dog walker clapped. The barista set down his coffees and added his hands to the rhythm. Sofia Martinez leaned out her Tesla window, her palms striking together, her eyes shining. Phones captured it all. The moment when a crowd of strangers recognized dignity and answered with recognition. Clara stood rigid, her face flushing crimson, but the sound of the applause drowned out her presence. Victoria Ellis didn't smile, didn't bow, didn't gloat. She simply let the applause rise around her, as if the air itself were affirming what she already knew. That presence didn't need permission. And for the first time that morning, the gate, the guards, and the gathering crowd were in unison. Not with Clara, but with Victoria. The applause swelled and then softened, like a tide receding after a storm. In its wake, Clara Jennings stood pale, her hands trembling as though the air itself had turned against her. Her badge blinked weakly, its red light pulsing in silent betrayal. Then a new voice filled the courtyard, steady, precise, amplified through Victoria Ellis's phone. Maya Chen again, but sharper this time, like the sound of a gavel in a courtroom. "Ms. Ellis, The Westridge Estates Board has convened. They've reviewed the compliance logs in real time. Effective immediately, Clara Jennings's management credentials are permanently revoked. Legal documentation for wrongful detainment and bias-based misconduct is now in process. The crowd gasped. The words permanently revoked hung in the air, heavy and final. One of the junior officers turned visibly pale. He removed his earpiece almost ceremonially, before tucking it into his vest pocket. The other officer shifted his stance, stepping quietly closer to Victoria, his body language making a declaration without words. He would follow her, not Clara. Luis Ramirez whispered into his live stream mic, his voice charged. That's it. It's over. She's out. We just watched someone lose their job on camera. And it wasn't Victoria who raised her voice. It was the system itself. Clara's lips parted, desperate to salvage something. Anything. Wait, please. This is a misunderstanding. Her voice cracked, a high-pitched echo of what had once been authority. Victoria turned, her gaze calm but sharp, her words deliberate and merciless in their simplicity. No, Clara, the misunderstanding was yours. You thought power was a badge and a gate, but power is presence, and you never had it. Phones caught every syllable, and in that moment, Clara Jennings was no longer the security manager of Westridge. She was simply a woman standing on the wrong side of the truth. Luis Ramirez's phone buzzed in his hand, the live stream counter climbing so fast he could barely keep up. 20,000, 25, 30. Comments scrolled like wildfire. This is how real power walks. She didn't even raise her voice. Never judge a black woman by her hoodie or her sweatpants. Luis's voice cracked with awe as he narrated, "You're all seeing this live. Clara Jennings just lost everything on camera. And Miss Ellis, she didn't have to argue once. The system, the facts, and her presence did it for her." Sofia Martinez leaned out of her Tesla, her phone angled toward her daughter still on FaceTime. Her eyes glistened as she whispered, "Listen to her. Frame every word." On the sidewalk, the young jogger shook her head in disbelief. "She just walked through like gravity followed her," she murmured, her voice carrying softly but powerfully into the crowd. Even the barista with a tray of iced coffees set them carefully onto the curb, his hands now free to clap and film all at once. He turned his phone toward himself, voice low but charged. "TikTok, you're watching history. They tried to lock out the woman who built this block, and she reset the system without shouting, without begging, just standing in her truth." The applause rose again, blending with the flood of online comments, merging into something larger, recognition. Victoria Ellis didn't need to speak. Her silence was amplified by tens of thousands, her presence transmitted across screens, cities, and countries. And somewhere behind her, Clara Jennings stood forgotten, a shadow erased by the brilliance of what had just gone viral. Dignity unshaken, power undeniable. The gate closed behind her with a soft, metallic sigh, sealing off the noise of the crowd and the murmur of live streams. Victoria Ellis stepped into her foyer, the hush of her home embracing her like silk after fire. Cool air slid across her skin, soothing the heat of the run, the confrontation, the weight of everything that had just unfolded. No applause followed her here, no cameras intruded, only silence, the kind she had built, brick by brick, to belong entirely to herself. She paused at the base of the grand, curved staircase. Above it, a black and white portrait gazed down, her mother framed in soft matte. Sunday dress, shoulders squared, eyes steady, one hand on her hip, the other resting on a Bible. The image not of vanity, but of defiance. Victoria's throat tightened. She let her gym bag slip from her shoulder, the thud of it against the hardwood echoing in the quiet. Her eyes stayed on the portrait, as though her mother's gaze could meet hers across decades. "You're still here," Victoria whispered, her voice almost breaking. "Every step, every gate, every door they tried to close. I carried you with me." She closed her eyes and memories stirred like old film reels. 7th grade, Southside Chicago, wearing a cousin's blazer 3 sizes too big for the science expo, only to be pointed at by a guard who said flatly, "You don't belong here." Back then, she had turned away in silence, walking outside into air that felt colder than any winter. Today, she had stood her ground. Today, she had walked through. Her eyes opened again, fixed on her mother's portrait. "This time," she whispered, "I didn't shrink." The house absorbed her words, quiet but eternal. Victoria Ellis moved slowly through the foyer, her footsteps soft against the hardwood. Past the staircase, past the quiet hum of the house's central system, she reached a small side table carved from dark oak. Resting on it was an old leather notebook, edges worn, its surface creased like the skin of something alive. She paused, fingertips brushing the cover, before lifting it gently. The weight of the book felt familiar, grounding. It was a journal she had carried through her early years at Ellis Tech, her place for vision, anger, dreams, and vows whispered into paper when the world refused to listen. Victoria flipped to the first page. The ink, though slightly faded, was still bold enough to pierce the moment. Legacy is not what you leave behind. It's what they can't erase while you're still here. Her breath caught. She let her finger trace the words almost reverently. The memory of writing them came rushing back, 13 years earlier, in a cramped office above a garage, where she had been dismissed by investors, doubted by partners, questioned by peers. Back when no one believed she would build something that could change skylines and gate codes alike. Now, after a morning where her very presence had been treated like trespass, the words struck deeper. She looked up, speaking into the stillness as though addressing every unseen witness beyond the walls. If you've ever been questioned, overlooked, told you don't belong, remember this. You don't have to raise your voice to raise the standard. The line hung in the air, quiet but resonant. Not for applause, not for cameras, for permanence. Victoria closed the notebook gently, her hand resting on the leather like sealing a covenant. Presence wasn't just power, it was legacy in motion. The silence of the house lingered, but it didn't last. Outside, the crowd remained. Neighbors, strangers, delivery drivers, joggers. Their phones still glowed like constellations scattered across the street, each one recording, each one waiting. A young reporter's voice carried over the low hum of whispers. Nervous but determined, she called out, "Ms. Ellis, do you have anything you want to say? To those watching? To anyone who's ever been treated the way you were today?" Victoria Ellis paused in the foyer, the leather notebook still warm in her hands. She set it gently on the table, drew in a steady breath, and walked back to the door. When she opened it, sunlight fell across her face, catching in the fine sheen of her skin. She didn't raise her arms or call for silence. She simply stepped onto the marble threshold, and the world leaned closer. Her eyes locked on the nearest camera lens. She didn't blink. She didn't flinch. Her voice when it came was low but clear enough to carry across the street and into every live stream. They didn't try to stop me because they knew who I was. They tried to stop me because they didn't. And that, she paused, letting the words breathe, is exactly why I built what I built. The crowd hushed. Even cars idling on the street went still. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw punches. I stood still, and the system moved. Then came the closer. The blade honed over a lifetime of being underestimated. You don't evict power from its own home. Phones shot higher. Live stream chats exploded. Sophia Martinez turned to her daughter on FaceTime. "That's the line. Frame it. Remember it." Victoria didn't wait for applause. She turned, her footsteps echoing up the marble stairs like punctuation. The door closed behind her. Not loud, not final, just certain. And for everyone watching, on the street, on their screens, in their own quiet battles, one truth settled in. They hadn't just underestimated a woman. They had misunderstood a movement.